Hey there, welcome to the video. I'm Dying Legacy and this is the Nature's Rage build, a stamina warden for solo content. Nature's Rage comes packing strong AoE skills that when paired with the Ring of the Pale Order translates to incredible healing. The focus on AoE doesn't take away from the single target damage in the slightest, and you'll be solo clearing vet arenas and content like a true champion of the forest. This is a quick build guide. We'll be going over the race, attributes, Mundus Stone, food and potions, followed by the gears, skills, passives and the champion points loadables. The info will be minimal, so I'll only be going over what's necessary. However, do feel free to comment and let me know if you want a full detailed guide or if there's anything I could do better. With that out of the way, let's get into the Nature's Rage build. Starting with the race, and as usual this is entirely up to yourself, as every race has its advantages and every player has their story. But if you're looking for suggestions, I'd recommend either the Nord for tanking, a Khajiit for critical damage, the Orc for weapon damage, or a Redguard for sustain. For the attributes, we are putting 64 points into stamina, and for our Mundus Stone, we are taking the Lover's Mundus, specifically for soloing. But when you decide to do some group content, you can switch to the Thief Mundus Stone to increase our critical rating. For our food, we are taking the Artaeum Takeaway Broth. This is a gold food that you can buy on the guild stores, or you can make it yourself, even though the materials themselves are quite expensive. However, this food is going to give us max health, health recovery, max stamina and stamina recovery. If the cost does happen to be a bit too much, you can always go for the Dubious Cameronian Throne, which will have a slight decrease to the overall stats and won't give us health recovery, but you can buy this from the guild store and you can also make it yourself for cheaper materials. And for our potions, we're using the Essence of Weapon Power. This will grant us major brutality, major savagery and major endurance, as well as recovering a small bit of stamina as well. You can buy these from the guild store. However, if you don't have any on you or just haven't the time to buy any, you can just stick with the Essence of Stamina potions that drop from the mobs around Tamriel. You'll primarily be using the potions for those harder to kill bosses, for when you really need to keep sustain on the go. And regardless of the situation, if you do use them, they're going to be free stats regardless, so there's never any reason not to use them. With the character and consumables out of the way, we'll be moving on to the gear. With this build, you have a choice of using the Ring of the Pale Order and a Maelstrom Bow. However, I do have options if you don't plan on using any of them, as they're not overly necessary to the build, and we can go without them. However, starting with the Ring of the Pale Order, which you can get from the Antiquity system, with a weapon damage enchant and the Bloodthirsty trait, the ring itself is going to restore 20% of the damage we deal as health, so anytime we're doing damage, this ring is going to constantly heal us. Just bear in mind, if you're in group content with other players, you will get back less healing depending on the amount of players. The ring itself is going to be taking up a slot, so because of this, we'll be taking one piece of a monster set to give us a few extra stats, and I would suggest taking the Magma Incarnate set. Either the helm or the shoulder, it doesn't matter which. You can grab the helm from the Dread Seller on Veteran, or you can grab the shoulder from the Undaunted vendor, which can be found in any city. Regardless if you're using the helm or the shoulder, make sure it's in the medium weight, and with a maximum stamina enchant and the Divine's trait. The Magma Incarnate set is going to give us some magical recovery and some stamina recovery, which will be handy to boost the overall sustain. However, if you're not able to get your hand on a Magma Incarnate set piece, you can always go for a Bloodspawn helm or shoulder, which can be found in Spindle Clutch 1 on Veteran for the helm, or of course from the Undaunted vendor for the shoulder. This will only give us stamina recovery, but overall stamina recovery is what we want, so overall it doesn't matter which you use, just grab whatever's easiest for you. If you're not using a Ring of the Pale Order, and you have the extra free slot, you can just grab the helm and the shoulder for the Bloodspawn set, so we get the extra proc from it. That's going to give us some extra physical and spell penetration, so the build itself will still keep some beefiness. Next, moving on to the Maelstrom Bow, you can grab this from the Maelstrom Arena. You can grab the perfected version from the Veteran difficulty of Maelstrom Arena. The only difference between the non-perfected and the perfected version are some extra critical chance. This will only add a slight increase to the damage overall, so it's not completely necessary to get the Veteran version. The normal version will do just as well. We will be running a weapon damage enchant on the bow and also the Infused trait. The Maelstrom Bow itself is going to increase the damage of volley per each tick up to a maximum 8 times. If you happen to not be able to get your hands on a Maelstrom Bow, you can always go with the Agility Bow. This can be gotten from the mail satchels after a random dungeon, or you can pick it up from a guild vendor. The Agility Bow is just going to increase our overall stats, and in place of the Maelstrom bow is still going to give us a good increase to our damage. But you could also double bar our front bar weapon onto the back bar as well, as long as it's a bow. This way our second set will proc on the back bar as well as on the front bar. Moving on to the first 5-piece set of the build. This is for our chest, waist, hands, legs and feet. And we're using the Arms of the Reliquant set, which you can grab from Cloud Rest. There is a perfected version as well because it's a trial dungeon. And you'll get the perfected version from the veteran difficulty. This will add some extra stamina to the set. Again, it's a very small increase to our overall damage, and so it's not completely necessary. You can still use the normal version if you prefer, as it is much easier to get. All pieces will have a maximum stamina enchant and the Divine's trait. Reliquant is going to apply a stack of harmful winds to our target whenever we do a light or heavy attack. The winds themselves are going to do physical damage per stack every 1 second, and it can stack every half a second up to 10 times. This is a very strong dot if you can maintain it. In place of Reliquants, you could also use the Selvigans Warband set, which you can get from Frostvault on either veteran or normal. This set is going to add a lot of critical chance and offensive penetration, and when we'll deal critical damage, we'll also gain a stack of precision, which is going to increase our critical chance by 166 for 5 seconds up to a stack of 10. At max stats, it's also going to give us minor force, increasing our critical damage done by 10%. This is a good set to use in place of Reliquant, and for some people can be much easier to get. Moving on to the second set of the builds, this is going to be for our front bar weapon and our jewellery. Our front bar weapon being a two-handed mace with the Absorb Stamina enchant and the Precise trait. And for our jewellery, it's going for weapon damage and the Bloodthirsty trait. If you're running the Ring of the Pale Order, you'll be using one piece of this set on either your shoulder or your helm, in medium with a maximum stamina enchant and the Divine's trait. And of course the set in question is the Venomous Smite set, which you can get from the Overland in Western Skyrim. This is from world bosses, treasure chests, delves and public dungeons. This set is going to add critical chance and weapon damage, and when dealing critical damage you're going to inflict Hunter's Venom onto our enemy for 10 seconds, which is going to deal poison damage to our target and enemies within 6 meters of them every 2 seconds. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds, and is a very strong dot and AoE skill, which is going to help keep the healing ticking from the Ring of the Pale Order, as well as doing extremely good damage. And that covers the gear. With that out of the way, we're going to move on to our skills, starting with the front bar. And we are using Stampede, which is morphed from Critical Charge. You can find this in the two-handed skill line. You'll launch across the earth and smash an enemy, dealing physical damage to them and all nearby enemies. This attack will always be a critical strike. And after you reach your target, you'll sunder the ground beneath them, dealing physical damage to all enemies in the area every 1 second for 15 seconds. We're also using Carve, which you'll morph from Cleave. This is also found in the two-handed skill line. You'll focus your strength into a mighty swing, dealing bleed damage to enemies in front of us and causing them to bleed for an additional amount of bleed damage over 12 seconds. And if you hit a target that's already bleeding from this ability, it'll extend the duration by 10 seconds up to a maximum of 30 seconds. You'll also gain a damage shield that absorbs damage for about 6 seconds. Now this ability will stack to 3 times with a duration of 30 seconds, so you want to put this onto an enemy by hitting them 3 times, and then every rotation you want to hit them at least once to keep this dot on them at all times. Next up, we're using Cutting Dive. You'll morph this from Dive. It's found in the Animal Companion skill line. This is the main spammable on the build. You will command a Cliff Racer to dive bomb an enemy, dealing bleed damage, and if you're more than 7 meters away from the target, you'll set them off balance for 7 seconds, and if the enemy is already off balance, the Cliff Racer rips through them, causing them to bleed for bleed damage over 7 seconds. This effect can stack. We're also using Subterranean Assault. You'll morph this from Scorch. It's also found in the Animal Companion skill line. You'll stir a group of shock that attack after 3 seconds, dealing poison damage to enemies in front of you. After the shock complete their attack, they'll burrow underground for 3 seconds and then resurface again, dealing poison damage to enemies in front of you. We are also using Growing Swarm. You can morph this from Swarm. It's found in the Animal Companion skill line. You'll unleash a swarm of Fletcher flies to relentlessly attack an enemy, causing them to bleed for bleed damage over 10 seconds. The Fletcher flies rip through the original enemy's flesh, afflicting them with minor vulnerability for the duration, increasing their damage taken. And enemies near the carrier take extra bleed damage every 2 seconds for the duration. You can only have one Growing Swarm active at a time, so pop this once, leave it run out before you pop it again onto someone else. We're also using the Wild Guardian Ultimate, morphed from Feral Guardian. This will rouse a grizzly to fight by your side. The grizzly swipes at an enemy, dealing physical damage, and sometimes swipes all enemies in front of it, dealing extra physical damage and stunning them for 2 seconds. Once summoned, you can activate Guardian Savagery for 70 ultimate, causing this grizzly to maul an enemy for physical damage, dealing 100% more damage to enemies below 25% health. This is the only ultimate on the build. We will have this on the back bar, because if we don't and you switch bars, you'll unsummon the bear. So we need to have this on both bars so we can keep it out at all times. Moving on to the back bar, we're using a bow, so we'll be using the Endless Hail ability, morphed from Volley, found in the bow skill line. You'll launch a multitude of arrows into the sky to rain down, dealing physical damage to enemies in the target area every 1 second for 12 seconds after a 2-second delay. We're also using Winter's Revenge, morph this from Impaling Shards. This is found in the Winter's Embrace skill line. You'll conjure icy shards at the target location to skewer enemies in the area, dealing frost damage every 1 second for 12 seconds. Enemies hit or overcome with bitter cold, reducing their movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds, and this ability has a higher chance to apply the chill status effect. We're also using a Bull Netch. You can morph this from Betty Netch. This is found in the Animal Companion skill line. You'll call a Bull Netch to your side, which restores stamina to you over 25 seconds and grants you Major Brutality and Sorcery, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 20%. Every 5 seconds, the Netch will remove 1 negative effect from you as well. We're also using Ice Fortress, morph this from Frost Cloak. You'll find this in the Winter's Embrace skill line. You'll wrap a thick cloak of ice around you and your allies, if you happen to be in a group. The ice grants Major Resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 5,948 for 25 seconds. You'll gain Minor Protection, reducing your damage taken by 5% for 25 seconds as well. We're also using Echoing Vigor on the build. You'll morph this from Vigor. It's found in the Assault skill line. You'll let loose a battle cry, instilling you and your allies with Resolve, healing for over 12,000 health over 10 seconds. And of course, for the ultimate, we're using Wild Guardian, which again is morphed from Feral Guardian. This is found in the Animal Companion skill line. This is the same ultimate that's on the front bar. We need to keep it on the back bar so when we switch, we don't unsummon the bear. And that covers the skills. And with the skills out of the way, we're going to move straight onto the passives, starting with the class passives. First up is Animal Companions. In here you'll find Bond with Nature, Savage Beast, Flourish, and Advanced Species. You want to grab all of these, as anytime one of our Animal Companion skills ends, we're going to heal. And when we cast an Animal Companion ability, we're going to generate extra ultimate. We're going to increase our magic and stamina recovery, and it's also going to increase our damage done by 2% for each Animal Companion ability slotted. Next up is the Green Balance skill line. In here you'll find Accelerated Growth, Nature's Gift, Emerald Moss, and Maturation. In here you're only going to need one passive, and that is Maturation. When you activate a heal on yourself or an ally, you grant the target minor toughness, increasing their max health by 10% for 20 seconds. All the other passives are activated when we use a Green Balance heal, of which we don't have any on the build. We're just using Echoing Vigor and a couple of minor heals, so only Maturation is going to proc. Next is the Winter's Embrace skill line. In here you'll find Glacial Present, Frozen Armor, Icy Aura, and Piercing Cold. These are going to increase the chance of applying chill to enemies. It's also going to increase our physical and spell resistance. It's going to reduce the effectiveness of snares against us, and it's also going to increase our magic and frost damage by 10%. We're also using a two-handed weapon on this build, so we're going to be taking the two-handed skill line. We'll grab everything that's in here, starting with Forceful, Heavy Weapons, Balanced Blade, Follow-Up, and Battle Rush. These are going to increase our stamina recovery. It's going to decrease the amount of stamina it's going to cost for us to use any two-handed skills, and it's also going to grant bonuses based on the weapon types we've equipped. We're also using a bow, so we're going to grab everything in the bow skill line, starting with Long Shots, Accuracy, Ranger, Hawkeye, and Hasty Retreat. Hasty Retreat is going to grant us Major Expedition for 4 seconds after we use a roll dodge. It's also going to grant us Hawkeye. For any time we deal damage on a light or heavy attack, it's going to increase the damage of our bow abilities by 5% for 5 seconds. This will stack up to 5 times. These passives are also going to reduce the stamina cost of our bow abilities. It's going to increase our critical chance, and it's also going to give us a damage bonus up to 12% against enemies at longer range. Next up is the Medium Armor skill line, as we're only using medium armor on this build, starting with Dexterity, Windwalker, Improved Sneak, Agility, and Athletics. This is going to increase our critical damage and critical healing, increase our stamina recovery, reduce the cost of Sneak, and reduce the size of our detection area. It's also going to increase our weapon and spell damage, and it's also going to increase the movement speed bonus of Sprint, as well as reduce the cost of roll dodge. Next up is the Undaunted Guild skill line. In here you'll find Undaunted Command and Undaunted Metal. Undaunted Command is going to cause activating a synergy to restore 4% of our max health, stamina, and magicka. This is based on us if we're in a group or not, as that's where you're going to see synergies the most. Undaunted Metal is going to increase our max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% per type of armor. We're only wearing medium armor, so it's just going to be a flat 2%, but it is a giant 2% increase to all of our stats. So definitely put 2 points into Undaunted Metal. Next up is just a handy skill to grab. You'll find it in the Assault skill line, and that's Continuous Attack. You'll gain Major Gallop at all times, increasing your mount speed by 30%. You'll also increase your weapon and spell damage by 10% and magic and stamina recovery by 10% for 10 minutes after you capture a lumber mill, farm, mine, or keep. That part is only to do with Cyrodiil, and you may never end up having to use it, so you should only put 1 point into the skill line if you just want to gain Major Gallop at all times, as you're not going to get any extra speed boost from putting a second point in. But Major Gallop will be active at all times no matter what you're doing, so it is a very handy skill to have. Next up are our racial skills. This all depends on what race you've actually chosen, so no matter what it is, if it's the Nord, Khajiit, Redguard, Orc, or whatever it may be, make sure to read over the actual skills themselves just to see what you're getting, and make sure to put points into everything. And lastly, in the Alchemy skill line, you're going to find Medicinal Use. You don't have to grab this if you don't want to, but when using potions, the resulting effects are going to last 30% longer, meaning you can always have a potion up, and it'll always last longer than the actual cooldown itself. So when a potion finishes, you can automatically just click to use another one and always have one going. And that covers the passives, and with that out of the way, we're going to move swiftly on to the champion point slottables, starting with the Warfare tree. In here, you'll find Fighting Finesse to increase our critical damage and critical healing, Deadly Aim to increase our damage done with single target attacks, Thaumaturge to increase your damage done with damage over time attacks, and Master at Arms to increase our damage done with direct damage attacks. And onto the Fitness tree, we'll find Boundless Vitality, which is going to increase our max health, Fortify to increase our max armor, and Rejuvenation to increase our max sustain. We'll also be taking Bloody Renewal to restore 300 stamina per stage whenever we kill an enemy. At max, it'll be 1500 stamina whenever you kill an enemy. And into the Craft skill line, it doesn't really matter what you grab in here. This is mainly up to yourself. Everything is kind of situational and personal. But for myself, for solo play, I like to grab the Treasure Hunter skill just to increase the quality of items in treasure chests. Rationeer to add 30 minutes to our food duration. Liquid Efficiency, so whenever we use a potion, there's a slight chance not to actually consume the potion. And also Steed's Blessing to increase our out of combat movement speed by 20% overall. That covers the Nature's Rage build. I hope you found it useful, and if you're looking for more builds like this, like and subscribe. I have one up every week. And if you've any thoughts or recommendations, or if you even just want to chat about the builds in general, or even give me tips or point out something where I might have gone wrong, then feel free to comment below. I do love chatting to all of you, and I do like to kind of help you out individually and also get feedback. It actually what makes the comments pretty fantastic. And if you happen to be looking for more content like this, you can find me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/dyinglegacy. I do stream quite regularly, and it does happen to be quite a lot of ESO, but there is a little bit of variety thrown in here or there. The variety of which I hope to bring to YouTube at some stage, but regardless of what I do end up doing extra on the side, I will always be doing ESO builds. And I believe that covers everything. Thank you so much for watching again, and I can't wait to catch you next week. I've been Dying Legacy, this has been the Nature's Rage build, and as always, thank you for watching, and be awesome!